The air was warm and thick with salt as Elian stepped off the wooden path and onto the sand. The late afternoon sun was just beginning its slow descent, casting amber light over the beach like honey poured across a table. Behind them, the sleepy seaside village of Windmere was quiet, its narrow stone streets basking in golden hour stillness. Most of the shops had closed for the day, save for one little bakery still giving off the scent of fresh bread and roasted figs. Elian took a deep breath, feeling the wind press gently against their face. It smelled of salt, distant rain, and something faintly sweet, like the sea had been steeped in memory. They had come alone, carrying nothing but a worn canvas satchel filled with simple things, a journal, a soft wool sweater, and a faded book of poems. It was the kind of arrival that didn't feel like the start of anything grand, but more like a quiet return. As if the ocean had been waiting. They stepped closer to the water's edge. The tide was out, revealing ripples in the sand shaped like shallow bowls. Little crabs scurried between pools, and thin ribbons of water reflected the sky like shards of glass. Elian crouched, dipped their fingers in one of the pools, and smiled faintly at the coldness. It grounded them, pulled them gently out of their mind and back into their body. Behind them, gulls called lazily. The sun hung lower now, its light catching on Elian's cheekbones and the tips of the dune grass dancing nearby. "I needed this," Elian said quietly, their voice nearly lost in the breeze. There was no reply, but the sea gave a long sigh, a wave rolling in and kissing the shore before retreating again. It felt like acknowledgement. Elian began to walk. Elian followed the line where sea and sand met, letting the cool water wrap around their ankles with each tide's reach. The sand here was soft and fine, glimmering faintly in the amber light. It sank a little under each step, but it felt good. Like the earth was encouraging them to slow down, to be deliberate. A winding trail curved up through the dunes, marked by a few wooden posts with rope threaded between them. The path looked worn, used only by locals or the occasional quiet traveler. Elian took it slowly, stepping between the tufts of wind-blown beach grass. The long blades swayed in rhythm with the sea, their whispering rustle mixing with the distant calls of shorebirds. There was a kind of music to it all, one without instruments, without melody, just the rhythm of a living place. At the crest of the dune, Elian paused. Below them lay the full sweep of the beach, a crescent of pale sand curving around a calm bay, with cliffs rising on the far side like guardians. At the base of one cliff stood an old lighthouse, whitewashed and tall, its light still off in the day's final stretch. Beyond it, the ocean stretched endlessly. The horizon was soft now, dissolving into mist where sea met sky. The breeze had cooled. Somewhere far out over the water, a faint foghorn groaned, low and mournful, like an ancient creature calling out in its sleep. Elian sat down in the sand. Their sweater, pulled from the satchel, smelled faintly of cedar and lavender, comforts from home. They wrapped it around their shoulders and rested their chin on their knees. "I wonder how long I should stay," they murmured aloud. The wind answered with a rustle through the dune grass, like an old friend shrugging, "As long as you need." They smiled. As twilight deepened, Elian stood and made their way down from the dune, returning to the flat stretch of shore. Their footfalls were quieter now, the wind calmer, the hush of evening settling in like a blanket over everything. They followed the shore toward the lighthouse, its white tower gleaming softly in the last light. With every step, Elian felt the pull of something familiar, though they couldn't quite place it, not memory exactly, but a kind of recognition in their bones. A little further on, a figure appeared up ahead, someone seated on a low rock near the water, their back to Elian. They wore a wide-brimmed hat and held something in their lap. A book, perhaps. Elian hesitated. The beach had felt like their own for the last hour. But something about the figure didn't feel intrusive. In fact, it felt natural. Like they'd always been part of the landscape. Curious, Elian approached with quiet steps until they were within a few yards. The figure turned slightly at the sound, revealing a calm, weather-worn face, eyes crinkled kindly at the edges. Evening, the stranger said, voice low and rich like a sea shanty sung half in memory. Elian nodded. Evening. The stranger gestured to the rock beside them. You can sit if you'd like. Good spot for thinking. Or forgetting. Depending on what you need. Elian studied the stranger's face, uncertain whether they'd met before. But the warmth in the man's tone was unmistakable. Thank you, Elian said softly, and sat. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching the tide roll in. The sky had shifted to deep blue, and the stars had begun to scatter overhead, hesitant at first, then more bold. The first star, high above the ocean, shimmered like a secret kept just barely. The man beside Elian reached into a worn leather pouch at his side and retrieved something, a piece of sea glass, smoothed to a frosted green pebble. He rolled it between his fingers before holding it out. Funny thing, he said, how something broken can be tumbled for years and end up softer than it started. Elian took the glass, feeling its cool, rounded edges. You found this here? Most things worth finding are here, if you know how to look, he replied with a half-smile. That's why I come back. Elian turned the glass in the fading light. It glowed faintly against their palm, like it had soaked up years of sun and sea. You live nearby? They asked. I stay nearby, he said. Little cottage past the dunes. I don't always live anywhere, really. There was no sadness in the statement, just truth. Like someone who'd made peace with movement. Elian nodded, understanding more than they could explain. I'm Elian, they said. Jonas, the man replied. And just like that, a thread tied gently between them. Night fell fully, and the cold began to settle in, not sharp, but real. Jonas stood slowly, stretching his back. Come on, he said. I've got a fire circle just up the path. They walked together, crunching through soft dunes until they reached a tucked-away hollow sheltered by wind-smoothed stones. Jonas began arranging driftwood with practiced ease, and within minutes, a soft fire crackled, casting long shadows on the sand. The warmth was immediate and comforting. Elian wrapped their sweater tighter and stared into the flames. Jonas handed over a tin mug filled with something steaming. Chamomile and rosemary, he explained. Picked the rosemary from the edge of the dunes. Elian sipped. The flavor was earthy and calming, almost like the fire had been poured into liquid form. Why do you come here? Jonas asked gently. Elian was quiet for a moment. To remember who I am, maybe. Or to stop trying to be anything. Jonas nodded. Good reason. This place has a way of peeling off everything that doesn't matter. Elian let the silence stretch, feeling its comfort. Here, words didn't need to fill space, only to anchor it. I used to come here with my grandfather, Elian said after a while. We'd build little forts out of driftwood and pretend we were shipwrecked explorers. Jonas smiled into his mug. Sounds like the best kind of story. The fire crackled softly between them, like it agreed. After the tea was finished and the fire burned lower, Jonas stood again. Come, he said. Let's see the light turn on. They walked the winding trail toward the lighthouse, the wind brushing their cheeks and the stars gleaming clearer now. The tall tower loomed ahead, still and quiet, but not lifeless. It had presence, like an old sentinel watching over both sea and land. Jonas unlocked a small gate and led Elian up the narrow steps that spiraled tightly within. The air inside smelled of oil, rust, and time. Each step creaked underfoot as though sighing stories from long ago. At the top, the room opened into glass, and the lens stood tall and crystalline in the center. It hadn't begun to rotate yet, but the moment felt poised, like the ocean itself was holding its breath. Then, with a low hum and a flicker, the light began to spin. Slow at first, then steady, casting long arms of gold over the waves. Elian inhaled sharply, not out of fear or surprise, but wonder. The light stretched over the sea like a hand reaching for something lost. Always loved this part, Jonas said quietly. It reminds the sea someone's watching. Elian leaned against the glass, watching the dark water blink with each revolution. It's beautiful. Jonas nodded. She's been doing this longer than either of us have been alive. Elian thought of time, of tides and memories, and felt, strangely, at peace. They lingered in the lighthouse for a while, watching the great beam sweep over the water. It cast a kind of rhythm into the night, slow, purposeful, like a heart beating in sleep. Elian pressed their hand against the cool glass, feeling the vibrations of the mechanism, the pulse of a keeper that had never left its post. Jonas leaned against the railing. You know, he said softly, some say lighthouses don't just guide ships. They keep memories. Secrets. Things people whisper to the wind when they think no one's listening. Elian smiled faintly. And does the lighthouse whisper back? Sometimes, Jonas said, his eyes flicking to the sea. But only when you're quiet enough to hear it. They stood there for a time, not speaking, just listening. And in the hush, Elian could almost believe it, that the creaks in the beams and the sigh of the waves below were more than sound. They were responses. Quiet affirmations in the language of old things. Eventually, they climbed down in silence. The stars above now blanketed the entire sky, thick and soft and endless. As they reached the ground, Jonas paused. I'll leave you here, he said. The beach is yours tonight. Elian looked out at the shore, lit only by starlight and the distant glimmer of the turning beacon. Thank you, they said, meaning it. Jonas tipped his hat. Sleep close to the tide. She brings better dreams. Then he turned, disappearing into the dunes like a ghost who belonged to the night. Elian walked until they found a dip in the dunes, cradled by tall grasses and shielded from the breeze. They laid out their sweater, folding it as a pillow, and settled onto the cool sand. It gave gently beneath them, shaping to their weight. Above, the stars shimmered in slow constellations. The Milky Way curled like a river of ancient light across the sky. Somewhere in the far distance, a loon called, haunting and beautiful. The waves murmured just beyond the dunes, their hush lulling like a mother's breath. Elian closed their eyes. Memories swirled softly behind their lids, not loud or demanding, but gentle flashes of time, a laugh in the rain, hands in warm dishwater, a song hummed by someone long gone. Not painful, just quiet. Pieces of self, returning. They breathed deeply. In. Salt and sea and rosemary. Out. Tension, the shape of worry, the press of expectations. Here, none of that mattered. The beach asked nothing. The stars demanded nothing. The ocean gave freely, cool air, steady rhythm, space. Elian let go. Sleep came not in a rush, but in ripples. Soft, slow waves pulling them gently out into the deep. And the last thing they heard before sleep took them completely was the sea whispering like an old friend, "You're safe here." The dreams were gentle. Elian found themselves walking barefoot along a different shore, one made of soft light instead of sand, where the sky pulsed like it breathed. Shapes moved in the distance, but not with menace. They were tall and fluid, like trees made of wind, and they watched Elian with curiosity. A small bird flew beside them, golden and glowing. It chirped softly, like it was guiding them. Elian followed, feeling light, not weightless, but unburdened. The bird led them to a wide, still pool that reflected not their face, but their memories, only they were calm, like paintings in slow motion. The time they fell asleep in the arms of someone they loved. The day they watched fog roll over hills. Their grandfather's face, laughing beside a driftwood fort. The pool whispered, not in words but in feelings, "You are not what you do. You are not what you've lost. You are what you carry with care." Elian touched the water. It rippled, and the stars above the dream sky shimmered in response. The bird circled them once, twice, then disappeared into the light. Elian smiled, and somewhere far away, their real body, curled in sand and wool, smiled too. When Elian awoke, the sky was still pale with dawn, streaked with pinks and silvers. Mist clung low over the dunes like a veil, and the air was cool with the kind of hush that only exists before birds begin to sing. They sat up slowly, brushing sand from their hair. The fire pit they and Jonas had shared was now cold and empty in the distance, but the lighthouse still stood, silent and tall, its beacon now dimmed in the morning light. Elian stretched, joints popping gently, and stood. Their feet sank into the dew-wet sand. Everything felt new, like the whole world had taken a deep breath while they slept. There was something tucked beside their bag. A piece of driftwood, smooth and pale, with a message carved carefully in neat, slanted letters. You listened. That's the first step. J. The tide had begun to roll in again, whispering in its endless language. And far out to sea, the morning sun broke fully through the clouds, pouring golden light across the water like a promise. Elian wandered the edge of the water as the sun rose, toes brushing the tide's edge, eyes still soft with sleep. A few seabirds flitted along the surf, and the waves lapped rhythmically at the sand, as if whispering you woke up just in time. Far ahead, a curl of smoke rose from the dunes, delicate and gray against the gold sky. Jonas, perhaps. Drawn by curiosity and the memory of rosemary tea, Elian followed the shoreline path until the smoke revealed its source, a tiny stone cottage, half sunken into a dune, its chimney puffing like a contented sigh. Driftwood framed its doorway. Shells hung like chimes from the awning. Jonas was outside, crouched over a small fire pit. He looked up and grinned. You sleep well? He asked without looking up, flipping something in a pan. I did, Elian said, brushing a strand of hair from their face. I dreamed of glowing birds and memories in a pool. Jonas chuckled. Ah, then the sea's already talking to you. He gestured to a small flat rock across from him. Sit. Breakfast is humble, but warm. Elian lowered themselves to the rock as Jonas passed over a ceramic plate with grilled bread, seaweed greens, and what looked like an egg, faintly blue, perfectly round. Gull egg, Jonas said. Collected with thanks. Only take what's offered. Elian took a bite. The flavors were simple, but grounded, like the wind had seasoned them. You live here full-time? They asked between bites. Not quite, Jonas replied. But the house is always here when I need it. Just like the sea. Elian nodded, chewing slowly, letting the salt and smoke blend with the wind. After breakfast, they walked. Not far, just a slow meander up the dunes, barefoot and unrushed. Jonas carried a walking stick carved with little spirals. Elian let their hand trail over tall reeds as they passed. They came to a flat stretch of sand, framed by two outcroppings of dark stone. The tide never reached this far, Jonas explained, so the sand here was always dry, always waiting. For messages, he said. Messages? Jonas smiled. To the shore. Or the sky. Or someone you're missing. He handed Elian a stick. Draw something, he said. But don't overthink it. The sand remembers feelings better than shapes. Elian knelt and began to trace. They drew a wide spiral, the kind they used to doodle in the margins of their notebooks. Then, without meaning to, their lines turned into waves, then a moon, then a hand reaching, or being reached for. Jonas nodded approvingly. Good. That's honest. Elian looked up. What happens to them? The wind sees them, he said, and carries them to where they belong. He pointed to a small rock cairn nearby. People leave stones after they draw. A little thank you. Elian stood and placed a flat, white pebble at the base of the cairn. A breeze stirred the sand, gently softening the edge of their drawing. But not erasing it, not yet. Later that day, While Jonas went to mend the shutters of the cottage, Elian wandered alone, following a trail of sea glass and tide-smoothed rocks. The beach stretched endlessly, curving out of sight like a whispered promise. Time began to loosen, there was no clock, no rush. Just light, sound, breath. Elian stooped near a tide pool and saw it, nestled between a tangle of seaweed and coral, a conch shell, perfect and pink, gleaming in the sunlight. They picked it up and held it to their ear. At first, there was only the familiar rush, the hollow echo of the sea. But then, faintly, something different, a hum. A slow, low melody. A tune, not made by instruments, but by wind and wave and memory. Elian's eyes widened. It felt like the shell wasn't just singing, it was remembering. Holding echoes from some long-lost psalm once sung to the sea. They sat cross-legged in the sand and listened for a long time. When the melody finally faded, they placed the shell carefully in their bag, like a treasure. Like a secret. And somewhere behind them, the waves clapped gently against the rocks, an approving applause. That evening, they returned to the fire pit. Jonas had already started a flame, its glow dancing across the sand. He handed Elian a cup of warm cider infused with cloves and orange peel. "Found anything today?" he asked. Elian pulled out the conch shell and placed it between them. "It sings." Jonas raised his brows. "Ah. So she's really taken a liking to you?" "She?" Elian asked. "The shore," Jonas said. "The sea. The place." He took a long sip from his mug. "She doesn't speak to everyone, you know. But when she does, it's always a beginning." Elian looked down at the shell and then up at the sky. Stars were beginning to peek through again, familiar now, like gentle companions returning for their nightly watch. "Will you tell me a story?" Elian asked softly. Jonas smiled and poked the fire. "Once, long ago," he began, "a lighthouse keeper fell in love with a selkie." And as he spoke, of moonlit dances, of ocean promises, of skin hidden beneath floorboards, Elian leaned closer to the fire, warm cider in hand, and felt their heart open like a tide-washed stone. But when the keeper finally returned her coat, Jonas said, voice low and smooth, the selkie wept, kissed his brow, and slipped into the waves, not as an escape, but a return. Elian exhaled, misting the cool night air. "I've never heard it told that way," they whispered. "With kindness." "Most people think letting go means loss," Jonas said, "but sometimes, it's a gift. A trust. The sea doesn't steal, it holds." The fire popped, sending tiny embers dancing upward. Jonas reached into his pocket and pulled something out, a small brass token with an engraving of a wave curled around a star. He placed it in Elian's palm. "Keep this," he said. "It's not for luck. It's for remembering. So you don't forget who you were while you were here." Elian looked down at it. The metal was warm from his hand. "Thank you," they murmured. Jonas nodded, rising slowly. "Sleep well, Elian." And with that, he disappeared once more into the dunes, like a story just finishing its last line. Elian sat by the fading fire, token in hand, the conch by their side, and the sea whispering its endless song. Elian curled into their blanket of sand and sweater once more, the brass token cradled in one hand, the conch shell resting near their head. The fire had dimmed to soft coals, and overhead, the stars shimmered brighter than they ever had in the city, like someone had polished the sky. Sleep took them gently again. This time, the dream came in layers. Elian walked a shoreline not of earth but of starlight, where each step left constellations behind in the sand. The sea was quiet, as if listening. In the dream, they weren't alone, a shadow walked beside them. Not threatening, not even clear, just presence. Like a memory they had not yet remembered. It didn't speak, but it offered a gesture, pointing out to the sea, where a small boat rocked in the surf, tethered by nothing. "Go," the presence seemed to say. And Elian stepped into the boat. It rocked, but didn't capsize. The sea accepted them without question. As the boat drifted outward, the stars above bent downward, like a blanket being drawn over the world. And just before Elian woke, they heard a voice, soft and female, like wind over water. Not all who drift are lost. Then, stillness. Elian awoke with the dawn. The sun was still shy, its light spilling softly like spilled milk across the sea. They sat up, rubbing their eyes. Something shimmered near the shoreline. They stood and walked toward it. There, nestled among the rocks, was a rowboat, old but sturdy. Faded blue paint, a bit of seaweed tangled in the oars, and a bundle tucked into the seat, a loaf of bread, wrapped in cloth, and a small jar of sea salt honey. Tied to the prow was a scrap of parchment. The sea listens when you do. J. Elian ran their fingers along the boat's worn wood. It meant. Like it had been waiting. They looked out at the still water. Calm. Inviting. Not a command, but an invitation. The kind that changes everything, but only if you accept it. They didn't climb in. Not yet. Instead, they took the bread and honey, sat near the bow, and ate slowly, letting the waves make their decision for them. Later that day, Jonas led Elian inland, not far, just through a narrow path between tall reeds and up a sandy ridge. At the top stood a tree, gnarled and salt-bitten, its bark pale as bone. It leaned slightly toward the ocean as if longing to return. Tied to its branches were ribbons, each faded by sun and wind. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Some frayed, some bright. Some held shells or beads or paper scrolls. This is the message tree, Jonas said. We all leave something here. When it's time. Elian stared, heart softening. Messages to whoever they need to reach, Jonas said simply. People leave words. Wishes. Goodbyes. He handed Elian a piece of blue ribbon. Elian held it for a long time, feeling the slight texture between their fingers. Then they pulled a pen from their bag, they'd almost forgotten they had one, and wrote, in tiny print. I forgive you. I forgive me, too. They tied it gently to a low branch, where it fluttered just above the sand. The breeze picked up slightly, and the tree seemed to rustle in thanks. That evening, a storm threatened on the horizon. Not one of fury, but of weight, the kind that brings introspection more than thunder. Jonas and Elian built the fire higher, adding driftwood and bits of dry sea brush. It crackled eagerly, flames reaching up in swirling orange waves. Jonas handed over a pouch. Bay leaf. Lavender. Toss it in. Elian did, and the scent rose immediately, calming, ancient. It smelled like temples and sea caves and the pages of books left open too long. You've changed, Jonas said. Elian looked up, surprised. Not completely, he added. But enough to notice. Elian turned the brass token over in their hand. I feel lighter. Jonas nodded. Because you've let the sea hold something for you. They sat in silence, watching the fire consume the herbs. The wind picked up, brushing their hair, tugging at the edges of their memory. The night deepened. And in the hush between gusts, Elian felt it, the storm turning back out to sea. As if the shore had said, not tonight, and the clouds had agreed. The next morning, as Elian walked the beach alone, their foot struck something buried in the sand. A bottle, thick glass, corked tightly, worn smooth with time. Inside, a letter. The paper was curled and yellowed, but the ink remained. To whoever finds this. I came here to forget. But the sea reminded me. I thought I had nothing left. But then I saw the stars again. If you are reading this, you are not alone. There's always another tide. Love. Someone who stayed long enough to return. Elian sat cross-legged and read it 3 times. Then they smiled, uncorked the bottle, and added their own message on a scrap of paper. I remembered. And I'm still remembering. Thank you. They recorked it, kissed the glass, and tossed it gently into the tide. It bobbed once, then drifted outward. Not lost. Just on its way. Elian awoke to a morning painted soft with pastel light. The sky wore a gentle blush, and the sea mirrored its tender hues, a calm stretch of glassy water touched by a whisper of breeze. They rose slowly, their bodies still heavy with sleep but their mind clear, like the moment just before the sun breaks the horizon. The rowboat from the day before was gone, vanished as if claimed by the sea itself. Yet the bread crumbs they had left near the shore were gone too, swept away by the tide's careful hand. Elian walked along the beach, sand cool beneath their feet, and found a small collection of shells shaped like hearts. Someone had left them arranged carefully on a flat stone. A note nearby, half buried, read, "You carry more light than you know." Elian smiled, heart swelling quietly, and pocketed one shell as a keepsake. Later that afternoon, Elian sat by the edge of the water, watching waves fold onto the sand like old friends greeting each other. The conch shell lay beside them. They lifted it again to their ear, searching for the melody, the hum they'd heard before. This time, the tune was clearer, richer, as if the sea was sharing a story. Elian hummed along softly, the sound blending with the waves, until a sudden breeze caught a flurry of white feathers drifting from the sky. A single feather floated down and landed lightly on Elian's palm. They closed their hand around it and whispered, "Thank you." The ocean replied with a wave's gentle rush, a promise, an embrace, a secret shared. As dusk settled, Jonas appeared carrying a lantern, old-fashioned, its glass panes etched with tiny star shapes. "I thought you might need this," he said, offering the warm glow. Elian took it gratefully. "The light doesn't just show the way," Jonas explained. "It holds the darkness back, too. Especially when you don't know what's ahead." They walked together toward the lighthouse, the lantern casting dancing shadows on the sand. At the base of the tower, Jonas paused. "Sometimes," he said, "you have to choose to be the light, even if you're not sure you can." Elian nodded, clutching the lantern, feeling its steady warmth seep into their bones. Before night fully claimed the shore, Elian wandered near a tide-pool glistening with life. They knelt, peering in. Tiny fish darted between seaweed, anemones pulsed softly, and small crabs scuttled over stones. Elian dipped a finger into the water. The coolness rippled outward, blurring the reflection of the stars above. In that moment, Elian felt a connection, to this place, to the sea, to something deep inside themselves. A whisper in the breeze seemed to say, "You are part of the story, just as the tide is part of the shore." They smiled, the tide-pool holding the night sky like a mirror, infinite, calm, and full of quiet wonder. Night deepened and the stars blazed brighter, but Elian was ready to rest. They settled into their sandy nest once more, the brass token warm in their pocket, the conch shell close at hand. The waves sang their lullaby, steady and sure. Elian closed their eyes, heart light with the knowledge that whatever storms came, whatever shadows chased them, the shore would always whisper its promise. "The dawn will come. You are never alone." And with that, sleep wrapped around Elian like a soft tide pulling them into dreams. Elian awoke to a world shrouded in soft mist, the shoreline cloaked in a veil of silver gray that blurred the edges of sand and sea. The air was cool and damp, carrying the faint, clean scent of salt and earth. They stepped out of their makeshift bed and inhaled deeply, feeling the mist wrap around them like a cool embrace. The sounds of the shore were muffled yet persistent, the distant call of gulls, the subtle crashing of waves, and the soft rustle of reeds swaying with the breeze. Walking along the beach, Elian noticed footprints leading from the water's edge toward the dunes, delicate and human, but unfamiliar. They followed the trail carefully, curiosity stirring gently inside. At the base of the dunes, they found Jonas tending a small garden of wildflowers and herbs, their colors muted by the mist but no less vibrant in spirit. "Good morning," Jonas greeted, wiping soil from his hands. "Good morning," Elian replied, watching the dew cling to the petals. "Is it always this quiet here?" Jonas smiled softly. "Only before the day wakes fully. The mist holds a secret, a pause, like the breath before a song." They stood together in silence, sharing the calm moment before the sun's warmth would scatter the fog and fill the day with light. Inspired by the quiet magic of the mist, Elian gathered smooth driftwood and a small pile of stones, sitting at the shore to write messages. Using a stick, they traced words and drawings in the wet sand, declarations of hope, forgiveness, and dreams whispered into shapes that the tide would soon reclaim. Jonas joined, carving a delicate spiral that seemed to glow even under the muted sky. They talked softly as they worked, about places they'd never been, memories tucked away like hidden shells, and the strange comfort of being known by the sea. As the waves gently erased their letters, Elian realized that some messages are meant only for the moment, carried away to live in the heart of the shore. Later that afternoon, a seagull landed nearby, watching Elian with curious eyes. It carried something shiny in its beak, a small, sea-polished glass bottle sealed with a cork. The bird dropped the bottle at Elian's feet and took off, wings beating against the breeze. Inside the bottle was a tiny note, written on delicate paper. "For the one who listens, may your journey be full of light." Elian uncorked the bottle and read the message aloud, the words feeling like a warm breeze through their chest. They smiled, then looked up at the sky, where the seagull circled once more before disappearing toward the horizon. That evening, Elian climbed the winding stairs of the lighthouse with Jonas. At the top, the window framed a breathtaking panorama, the ocean stretching endlessly beneath a sky scattered with stars. Jonas pointed to a faint light blinking far out at sea. "That's a ship," he said. "Guided safely home by this light." Elian leaned against the cold glass, watching the gentle pulse of the beacon. "It feels like a promise," Elian murmured. Jonas nodded. "A promise that no matter how far we wander, there's always a way back." They stayed for a long time, wrapped in the quiet warmth of the lantern's glow and the vastness of the sea. Back on the beach, as night settled in fully, Elian sat by the remnants of the day's fire. The stars overhead twinkled like scattered gems, and the ocean whispered softly nearby. Elian took the conch shell from their bag and held it to their ear, hearing once again the deep, soothing melody of the sea. They thought of the messages, the feathers, the light, all the small gifts the shore had offered. With a heart full of gratitude and peace, Elian closed their eyes and let the rhythm of the waves carry them gently toward sleep. Elian woke before dawn, the sky still a deep blue velvet studded with fading stars. The sea whispered softly, its gentle lapping pulling at the shore like a familiar song. Drawn by the quiet, Elian stepped barefoot onto the cool sand. The tide was low, revealing pools where tiny creatures scurried and shimmered. As they walked, the footprints from the day before had disappeared, replaced by fresh prints from a small group of crabs, their movement precise and purposeful. Elian crouched beside a tide-pool, marveling at the miniature world within, anemones pulsing gently, fish flickering like sparks of light, and a solitary starfish nestled beneath the water's surface. A soft breeze stirred, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine from the nearby dunes. Elian breathed deeply, feeling the promise of a new day settle warmly in their chest. After breakfast, Elian wandered toward the dunes where tall grasses swayed like a sea of green waves. The grasses whispered secrets as the wind passed through, a soft susurrus that felt like a language almost understood. They ran their hands over the waving blades, feeling the sharp edges and the smooth softness beneath. Suddenly, a voice called out softly from the other side of the ridge. "Elian." They turned to see Jonas waving, holding a small bundle of dried flowers tied with a ribbon. "Come," he said. "There's something I want to show you." Curious, Elian followed him over the dunes and down into a sheltered hollow, where wildflowers bloomed against the sandy earth, their colors bright despite the salty air. Jonas handed Elian the bundle. "Take them," he said. For strength when you need it most. Elian accepted, touched by the quiet kindness. On a walk later that afternoon, Elian met an elderly woman gathering shells along the shore. Her hair was silver, catching the sun like spun moonlight, and her eyes sparkled with stories. She smiled warmly. Looking for something special? Elian nodded, explaining their journey. The woman chuckled softly. The sea gives what it will. Sometimes it's a shell, sometimes a story, sometimes a moment you never forget. She offered Elian a small shell, iridescent and smooth. Keep this, she said. To remind you that beauty often comes in quiet packages. Elian accepted gratefully, feeling the shell's cool weight in their palm. They shared stories as the tide crept closer, two strangers connected by the timeless rhythm of the shore. As night fell, a blanket of stars unfolded overhead, and the moon hung low, casting silver light across the waves. Elian sat alone on a driftwood log, wrapped in a woolen shawl, the air crisp but gentle. They traced patterns in the sand, watching the water come in and smooth them away. The world felt vast and small all at once, a paradox held by the shore. Elian breathed deeply, feeling the steady pulse of the ocean echo in their heart. A shooting star streaked across the sky, leaving a fleeting trail of light. They closed their eyes, making a silent wish for peace and belonging. The following morning, Elian awoke to find the blue rowboat gently bobbing at the water's edge once more. This time, it carried a small bundle, a neatly folded blanket, a flask of warm tea, and a note pinned beneath a smooth stone. Elian unfolded the note, which read, "For your journey, may the sea guide your steps and the stars light your way." They smiled, feeling the warmth of the gift seep into their soul. The boat was ready, an invitation waiting to be accepted. Elian prepared the rowboat with the blanket and flask, their fingers lingering on the cool wood of the oars. The sea was calm, the horizon soft and welcoming under a pale sky. They slid into the boat, the water lapping gently against the sides. With careful strokes, Elian began to row, each movement smooth and steady. The shore slowly receded, replaced by endless blue and the whisper of waves beneath the hull. Jonas stood at the water's edge, watching with a quiet smile and a wave. Elian felt a mixture of excitement and calm, a balance between the thrill of adventure and the peace of letting go. As the boat drifted further out, they settled back against the wooden seat, blanket wrapped around their shoulders, and sipped the warm tea. The sea's song filled the air, steady and eternal. After some time drifting, Elian noticed ripples nearby, playful and quick. A pod of dolphins surfaced, their sleek bodies cutting through the water with grace. They circled the boat, leaping and chirping, their eyes bright with intelligence and friendliness. Elian reached out tentatively, and a dolphin nudged their hand gently. For a moment, the boundary between human and sea creature seemed to blur, a connection deeper than words. The dolphins danced around the boat, guiding Elian toward a distant island that rose like a jewel on the horizon. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with streaks of gold and rose, Elian approached the island's shoreline. Soft sand gave way to lush greenery, and the scent of wildflowers and salt hung in the warm air. Elian stepped out of the boat and onto the shore, feeling the island's heartbeat beneath their feet. Exploring slowly, they found a hidden cove where colorful shells and smooth stones littered the sand. A cluster of bright butterflies fluttered by, landing briefly on wildflowers before lifting into the evening light. Elian breathed deeply, absorbing the island's quiet magic. As darkness fell, Elian gathered driftwood to build a small fire near the cove. The flames crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on the rocks and leaves. Wrapped in the blanket, they sipped tea and watched the stars emerge one by one. The night was alive with sounds, the distant call of night birds, the rustle of leaves, the gentle crash of waves. Elian felt wrapped in the embrace of the island, the fire, and the endless sky. They allowed their thoughts to drift, carried by the rhythm of crackling flames and the steady pulse of the sea. That night, Elian slept beneath a canopy of stars, the fire's warmth fading to embers. Their dreams were vivid, they walked through fields of light, where every step brought memories and visions of those they loved and had lost. In the dream, a figure appeared, radiant and smiling, offering a hand. Elian took it, feeling a profound peace wash over them. The figure whispered words they couldn't quite remember upon waking, but the feeling remained: hope, love, and belonging. The island had shared its secret, that healing is a journey, sometimes slow, always gentle. Elian woke to soft light filtering through leaves, casting dancing patterns on their face. The air was warm, scented with salt and wildflowers. Birdsong filled the canopy above, a delicate chorus that seemed to welcome the new day. Stretching slowly, Elian rose and wandered toward the shoreline, where the sea sparkled like scattered diamonds under the morning sun. The island felt alive, every leaf, every wave part of a quiet symphony. Elian knelt to touch a smooth stone, its surface worn by endless tides, and whispered, "Thank you." Exploring further inland, Elian noticed a narrow path lined with small lanterns flickering faintly despite the daylight. Curious, they followed it through groves of twisted trees and fields of tall grass. At the path's end was a small clearing with a natural spring, water so clear it reflected the sky like glass. Elian knelt and cupped the cool water, feeling it refresh and renew. They drank deeply and sat by the spring, contemplating the journey ahead. The gentle sound of the water flowing seemed to whisper encouragement. As the sun climbed higher, a figure appeared on the path, a young woman with eyes like the sea, calm and deep. She smiled warmly. "Welcome," she said. "You've come far." Elian returned the smile, feeling an immediate trust. "I'm Mara," the woman introduced herself. "This island holds many stories, some old, some waiting to be found." They talked for hours, sharing stories of the sea, of journeys both physical and within. Mara spoke of courage and kindness, of the quiet strength found in vulnerability. Elian listened, feeling their heart grow lighter with every word. Mara led Elian to a circle of stones where ancient symbols were carved, worn smooth by time. "Here," she explained, "is where stories live. Every person who comes adds a story, a piece of their soul." Elian placed the shell given by the elderly woman onto the stones, feeling a deep connection ripple through them. Mara began to tell a story, one of love, loss, and hope, weaving images that felt both new and familiar. As the tale unfolded, Elian realized that their own journey was part of a much larger tapestry. As the sun set, painting the sky with fire and gold, Elian and Mara returned to the shore. The sea was calm, reflecting the colors like a vast mirror. Elian felt a peacefulness settle in their chest, a quiet certainty that they were exactly where they needed to be. Mara smiled and said softly, "The shore always whispers the truth, if you listen." Elian nodded, watching the waves gently fold onto the sand, ready to welcome whatever tomorrow might bring. Elian awoke before the sun, stirred by the soft chorus of birds greeting the new day. Their melodies wove through the cool morning air like a delicate thread. Stepping outside the small shelter they had made, Elian watched the horizon glow faintly with early light, promising warmth and new beginnings. The island felt alive with possibility, each breath filling Elian with a quiet hope. A gentle breeze played with the edges of the blanket wrapped around their shoulders, and the waves whispered a timeless greeting. Following Mara's guidance, Elian ventured into a hidden garden where sunlight filtered through leafy canopies, casting a mosaic of gold and green. Flowers of every color bloomed in soft profusion, and butterflies drifted lazily among them. Elian knelt beside a patch of lavender, inhaling its calming scent, and felt a profound stillness settle deep within. Mara watched nearby, smiling gently. "This garden," Mara said softly, "is a place of healing. It reminds us that growth often happens quietly, beneath the surface." Elian nodded, feeling the truth in her words bloom like the flowers around them. Mara handed Elian a thin, woven cord and a small collection of shells gathered from the island's shore. "Make something to carry with you," she suggested. "A reminder of this place and the strength you've found." Elian threaded the shells carefully, each one smooth and cool, feeling the steady rhythm of the waves in their fingers. When the necklace was finished, Mara fastened it around Elian's neck. "It will guide you," Mara said, her voice warm and sure. Elian smiled, heart full. As twilight deepened, Elian sat quietly by the fire, watching sparks spiral upward into the darkening sky. The sea breathed softly nearby, its constant presence a comforting rhythm. Elian thought of the journey, the moments of doubt, the gifts of kindness, the lessons whispered by the shore. A soft smile curved their lips. Here, on this island between sea and sky, they had found something precious, a sense of peace and belonging. Night settled over the island like a soft quilt, and the stars emerged in full brilliance. Elian lay beneath the vast canopy, the shell necklace resting against their skin. They listened to the waves' gentle lullaby and felt a deep, steady calm. Tomorrow was uncertain, full of possibility and mystery. But Elian knew one thing for sure, the shore's whisper would always guide them home. And with that comforting thought, sleep came softly, carrying them into dreams filled with light. Elian woke to the soft glow of dawn, the sky painted in shades of pink and lavender. The air was fresh and cool, filled with the gentle songs of early birds. Stretching, they stepped out to the shoreline, where the waves kissed the sand with a tender rhythm. The island felt like a place where time moved slowly, moments stretched and deepened, inviting presence and calm. Elian ran their fingers through the sand, feeling its fine grains slip like memories between their fingers. A distant sailboat traced a silver line across the horizon, a quiet promise of new adventures. Following a narrow trail marked by soft moss and blooming ferns, Elian discovered a hidden lagoon nestled within the island's heart. The water was crystal clear, reflecting the towering cliffs and swaying palms. Elian dipped their hands into the cool water, watching fish dart beneath the surface. They sat on a smooth rock, letting the gentle warmth of the sun and the quiet peace of the lagoon seep into their bones. Here, away from all noise and worry, Elian felt a deep stillness, a moment suspended in time. As dusk fell, a nightingale perched nearby, its melody weaving through the trees like a silver thread. Elian listened, entranced by the pure, haunting song that seemed to hold the weight of the whole world, sorrow, joy, and hope entwined. Mara appeared silently beside them, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the setting sun. "The nightingale's song," Mara said, "is a reminder that even in darkness, there is beauty and light." Elian smiled, feeling the music fill their heart with quiet courage. Later that evening, the island was alive with tiny points of light, fireflies flickering in an enchanted dance. Elian reached out, catching one gently on their palm, marveling at the soft glow pulsing within. The dance of lights felt like a celebration of life's small wonders, moments that often go unnoticed. Mara and Elian laughed softly, their voices blending with the gentle hum of the night. Under the stars, surrounded by glowing sparks, the world felt full of magic and possibility. As night deepened, Elian lay on a bed of soft moss beneath the open sky. The stars shimmered overhead, their ancient light whispering stories across the vastness. Wrapped in the warmth of the island and the gentle rhythm of the sea, Elian felt their breath slow and deepen. The world softened into a lullaby, waves, wind, and stars weaving a blanket of calm. Sleep came gently, carrying Elian into dreams filled with hope and the promise of tomorrow.